Welcome to the New Rainmaker Podcast, a weekly show for visionary founders and team members alike to come together and share the heartfelt, the cringe, and the radically honest truths about what it's really like to build and work for some of the world's most exposed brands on the biggest internet stages. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, and after working for some of the biggest names in the online space myself, I've learned that it takes both leadership and dream team collaboration to truly scale a company to its greatest potential. You can build a business alone, but you cannot scale it on your own. And my goal on today's episode and every episode is to inspire our dreamers and empower our leaders. Make sure to follow and share my podcast with your friends and colleagues, and feel free to tag me on Instagram at vromney with your insights and ahas. Now let's make it rain on today's episode. Hey Rainmaker Podcast, super excited to bring to you a special guest today to talk about something that has been pressing for me. It is 2023, and I think a lot of us are over some of the marketing techniques of the past. Certainly the hustle, the grind of working the algorithm, working the ads, working the things. And this is my number one source of marketing personally. And I'm bringing on a guest expert to talk about it because it's also her number one form of marketing, and she's phenomenal at it. So what better person, expert thought leader on this topic than the Danielle Wiebe from the Business Babe Collective. Hey, Danielle.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here, Veronica. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we are recent friends. How are we recent friends? Because we were connected by another relationship. So we're brought together by the Ellen from Cubicle to CEO, one of the kindest, most heart-centric human beings I've ever met. How do I know her? I know her through Haley Burkhead. How do I know Haley? I know, it's amazing how I can trace back the friendship to friendship to friendship that then translates into business and helping each other on business. But before I get too far into this topic, why don't you do the formal introduction to the community as to why you're such a boss at what you do?
Well, thank you for that intro. I mean, wow. So yes, I am the founder of Business Babes Collective. We started hosting these little pop-up events over 8 years ago. And really it was because I had this desire for community. I had started businesses of my own and was feeling that there wasn't community for people like me who were either, at the beginning stages of their business or really trying to grow and wanting to connect and network and collaborate with other entrepreneurs. And so started hosting these little events. It honestly started as a hobby. And slowly but surely it snowballed into a full-blown business of its own and created a life of its own. And so in more recent years, I launched a podcast, I launched a course, we have a mastermind, and really my focus is helping women to connect, to collaborate, and to create mutually beneficial partnerships and relationships with other business women or other businesses in general to help them grow their businesses. And I think a lot of people, for this, it somewhat comes naturally, but then for other people, it really doesn't. And so I'm really trying to help both people. Like, how do we create these partnerships and these relationships that don't feel so one-sided? Or, maybe people have had experiences in the past where they've done a collaboration or they worked with someone else and maybe they've gotten burnt, right? And so I love to talk about this topic. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because I think there is always a way to make it mutually beneficial. I think there's always a way to have both parties feel valued and excited to work together, and it grows everyone's business. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, we're going to just dive right in because I have all the questions,
Yes.
and this is what I do. None of it's pre-rehearsed or scripted. You don't even know what I'm going to ask, so we're just going to go with it. But yeah, you and I are recent friends because of another person bringing us together, and this is my whole belief system. So before the internet, before Yellow Pages, before ads, before social media, before any of these incredible platforms that give you the ability to do business without borders, and to do business from home, which I think has opened a huge opportunity for women in particular. So even before all of these things that are a blessing, no doubt, business was just conducted by relationships. My parents had a business for 33 years. I mean, they were HVAC contractors, rendering services, repairing AC units. And my parents, who didn't even really speak that much English when they came to the country and started the company out of need and necessity to take care of themselves, it was just somebody recommending somebody who recommended somebody who and paid it forward. And it's funny to me, and I know that you know this, so I recently invited Danielle to be a guest expert inside the Rainmaker Residency Program, which is my program that creates marketing leaders so that CEOs don't have to be their own marketers for themselves anymore. And so it was a call just with the CEOs. And we brought this up because I'm telling you, these people are high caliber, 7-figure plus players. They're averaging $70,000 a month in gross revenue, up to 1 to 3 million a month type of room. And it's still humbling to me because regardless of their accolades, achievements, or P&Ls, there's still people with insecurities and, fears of putting themselves out there or creating relationships that are non-reciprocal or not knowing how to convert a friendly relationship into a business relationship without it feeling awkward or weird or poachy or uncomfortable. And so Danielle came in, and I know you got bombarded with a whole bunch of questions, which we can get into, but I love what you said about how 8 years ago you started this because you had a desire for connection and community. Pre-pandemic, pre-anything. Here we are, post-pandemic, and the desire for community and connection is still here because it never went away. Can we just talk about that? Like, let's just talk about the need for human beings to feel connected and have a place to be seen as you want to be seen and as who you truly are.
I'm so glad you asked that question because it's something I'm so passionate about. I believe we were created for connection and relationships. And I think that so many of us try to do life and business on our own. And we try to, we have almost this pride of like, I did it all myself. And there's this, these movements of self-made movement and all of these things. And it's like, no, like, we need to like band together. We need to support one another. And as business owners, no one is truly quote unquote self-made. Like we've all been helped and supported by people along the way. So no matter where we're at in our business, whether we're just getting started or whether we are, some of your clients who are 8-9 figures, it doesn't matter. You still need people. Like people are your clients and your customers. People are your collaborators. People are on your team. And so when we look at our businesses as just, okay, what can I do or how can I get to that next level? It's like if we looked at it more as a collaborative effort of how can I support someone else and how can and really like having this, I think there's so many different sides of it, but there's this strategic side of it, which I love talking about, and we can absolutely get into that as well. But there's also the mindset of having an abundance mindset of there is more than enough business for everyone. There's endless opportunities for us to grow and to scale our businesses. And so we don't have to think of other people as, oh, he's my competition, she's my competition. It's like, how can we support one another and how can we actually grow together? And, if you look at some of the most successful businesses, they're collaborating with each other. They're helping each other. They're supporting each other. And, I think you mentioned something potentially on the call and maybe you want to share that. But yeah, you look at some people who are speaking on the biggest stages and they have the biggest personal brands, and they're collaborating with people who could be seen as their direct competitors, yet they're promoting each other. And so it's like, if they're doing that, then why are we as people who are growing and scaling our businesses not looking at that and saying, oh, that's something to look at and think, okay, why would they be doing that? What does that look like? What does the collaborative partnership or supportive relationship look like, right?
Ooh, I'm going to go right into the deep end. So yes, exactly what you said. So what Danielle's talking about is really out the gate, one of the first questions that came up on our call with some of my CEOs was I'm going to paraphrase, but to the extent of I withhold extending my hand for potential collaborations, swaps, partnerships, referrals, etc., because I'm nervous that we're direct competitors. Or I'm nervous that if I recommend you, then this person now is going to be placed in a decision where they had to either choose to either work with me or work with you. Oh no. Especially if it's 2 group programs or 2 high ticket group programs or 2, you know what I mean? Like when it really is, we're not working with somebody who is abundant in their wallets necessarily, and they have to make a decision on what's best at the moment that they need something, right? So I brought up on the call, I'm like, well, that's really interesting because as somebody who's worked behind the scenes with Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, or has run or been a part of like being an affiliate in their launch when I worked at Boss Babe, it always blew my mind how, name it, Brendan Bouchard, Dean, Tony, Russell, name. They all to some degree sell the exact same thing, which is they're all selling a product that will help you monetize your knowledge. Like literally different labels, different names, maybe potentially different container types or specificity in the container, but essentially it's the same kind of aspirational promise that they're offering to the marketplace, which is we will help you monetize your knowledge because you are just one chapter ahead of someone else, and you can show somebody else what you've achieved, and in the process build a company, build a business for yourself. Boom, like direct competitors, and yet they are constantly on each other's physical and virtual stages. They are players in the same mastermind groups. They're hosting masterminds for similar target demographics. It's like, I really like, they really are direct competitors, and yet they are also extremely close and very friendly, and also do business with one another. So at the highest levels, if we're seeing collaboration from people that you would deem direct competitors, then why do we tell ourselves that there is a limited resource or there is limited potential for who we can work with, and therefore limiting our abilities to recommend another? And I mean, a lot of that is mindset. A lot of that is deep rootedness that comes from different places. But I loved what you said, and I loved kind of how you offered an alternative perspective. So why don't you share that?
Yeah. And I also just want to mention, because as you were talking about that, it is so attractive to see that happening. And whenever I see another business promoting their own business by putting another business down, I immediately am a no. I'm literally immediately a no to that business. And so I think that, we really need to figure out, okay, if there is truly an abundant world where there's more than enough for all of us and we all can truly support one another, like why are we choosing to, whether it be directly, like literally running ads saying why this business sucks and why ours is amazing, but then also behind closed doors, why are we somewhat trying to like sabotage other people's businesses so that ours can be more successful? Like if we truly get to the root of it, I think it is insecurity, really. Like we don't maybe we don't believe that there's enough for all of us, or we're living in a scarce mentality where if that business succeeds, my business cannot succeed, which is totally untrue. It's, two exact businesses like you just mentioned and like you just described, they can thrive together. And if another business that is pretty much exactly copy paste yours, which it's never going to be copy paste because you're always going to do it in your own way, and you're going to have your own spin on it, your own personality on it. But even if it is, that means that there's demand for what you do. So if that business is successful, yours can be successful as well. And so I think it's just really switching your mindset on that. And I will say, when it comes to collaborations, because I think 100%, like I just truly believe like we should never be, even if we disagree with a brand or whatever, like we should never put another business down. Like it just, to me, it's just like, why spend your energy doing that? But I think when it comes to collaborations and creating mutually beneficial partnerships, you do want to make sure that you have some level of trust there, right? And you do also want to make sure that it's an aligned business that shares your values. So I'm not saying like go out there and collaborate with every single competitor that's in your space, because it might not make sense to do that if you don't have the same mindset, or if you don't have the same values, or you don't share the same ideas of business or what you do. So I would say that's the first step. Like if you want to get tactical, that is always my first step in, do I want to collaborate with this business? Do I want to work with this other business owner or business in general? That's the first step, is do their values align with my brand values as well?
Yes, I know what you're talking about. When you stand shoulder to soldier, oh my gosh, my little boy calls his shoulder a soldier. So when you stand soldier to soldier, you're essentially endorsing them. And that's even trickier too, like for example, with media companies in particular, because when you take on a client and you, in exchange for promotion, that they're going to pay you a fee, you have to really do your due diligence to know, like, okay, what do they stand for publicly, but also privately? How do they live their values that they espouse, or whatever, express externally? If you claim to be a brand for female empowerment, are you doing that with your own female staff, so to speak, right? We'll be back with this interview right after the commercial break. Did you know that I have a free Rainmaker hiring kit? Skip the formal recruiting process and learn how to source Rainmaker applicants that are already connected to you. I'll show you how to turn a walking testimonial into a rockstar team member for free. Head to veronicarami.com or click the link in my show notes to get your hands on the free Rainmaker hiring kit. Now let's get back to the show. The other thing that came up to me in what you're talking about, I was at a mastermind 2 weeks ago, and there was a lot of mind gremlins that started coming up because there were some direct competitors in the room. And I shouldn't even say direct competitors. They were similar providers or similar offers. They were both e-commerce. They both had jewelry. They both had something that was essentially very similar. And one of the things that I shared that I learned in some of my speaking training that I learned from Michael Port at Heroic Public Speaking and Amy Port, I'll never forget this. They said, you don't have to say anything different to make a difference. Because what they were trying to articulate really well was that you discredit the messenger. So you and I could literally say word for word the same counsel, advice, thought, leadership, and values and express our similar opinions. But someone might connect with you more as a messenger than they connect with me as a messenger, and vice versa. And that is totally okay. Even when you think about books that you've read, poems that you've read, scriptures that you read, depending on the season in which that you find yourself in life, they will carry different meaning for you at a particular time, or the power and effectiveness of the messenger who communicated the same thing that you had already heard. So that's what I mean. It's like there's an abundance of opportunity. There are people out there that need to be served. You are both united in your values to serve the same type of person. Hurrah for you guys. Don't discredit that each of you are uniquely different as messengers. And that in and of itself makes you different, even if your offers don't seem different on the surface.
100%. And I think too, like, it's so cool when I see businesses that are direct competitors. And like you mentioned, like, someone might be listening thinking, okay, but my business is different because XYZ. It's like, yes, but you know what? Someday you're going to be in a position where you have more business than you even know what to do with. And you might actually need the support of another direct competitor. Maybe you're both like, hey, we want to try to eliminate all waste in our packaging. What supplier are you using? Like what, and it's like, how can we actually make the world a better place by partnering together and collaborating? And it's really cool. I actually went to this event where they were talking about it was a very heavy topic, but just human trafficking in general and how that plays out in business and how that plays out just in the world. And it was really, really inspiring to hear that some of the biggest companies like Costco and Walmart and all of these brands, again, product-based brands who are a lot of times direct competitors. And the cool thing is that they had collaborated and said, okay, we need to do something about what is happening and solving it. And the thing is because they have such huge buying power, they were actually able to have a huge influence in their suppliers because they banded together. If one of them had said, well, we're going to keep buying from them anyways, we don't care, right? Then nothing changes. And so I think it's just like, we have to also look at like, what are our values? Like, what are our values? What are our ethics? And do we truly want to see the world be a better place? Do we want to serve our ideal clients and customers the best way that we possibly can and do it in an ethical way? Then we just have to embrace collaboration. We have to embrace community, because that is the way that it's going to make a difference.
100%. God, I love this conversation so much. Okay, so I'm going to ask more of, I guess, tactical questions here, because one of the things that came up on our call that I think is influencing this podcast quite a bit is, okay, we have big players who have big email lists and big audience sizes and what I would say pretty significant brand equity and authority. They're just sitting there. We're like, okay, now what? Like, how do you, and I don't know if our male counterparts struggled with this nearly as much as our female counterparts, who are extremely intuitive, and women exchange social currency to form relationships. And so we are way more conscious of it. We don't ever want to offend and things like that, right? Not to be stereotypical, but just by the nature of working with all female staff teams or male teams, I just noticed these trends, right? But we're on this call and everybody's sitting in a position of, I would say, power, and in a position to give a lot and also be the recipient of a lot. And they're nervous. How do you make the jump? Because it's like there's the line in the sand where we're friends, and then let's talk about business. Like, how do you, because you do it so smooth. Like, you and Ellen are such smooth operators. I'm like in awe of both of you. I'm like, this is such a gift. How have you rewritten the story in your mind to like make it not awkward? Because it doesn't come off awkward. So to my guess is it doesn't feel awkward for you.
Right. Okay. So I will say this, it has gotten so much easier over time. So it's not something that, I learned how to do overnight and I'm just like naturally good at it. Like, I've made a ton of mistakes. I've made so many mistakes in this area. And so I think it's a lot of like trial and error. But one of the things that I really hold to is any collaboration, any partnership that you do needs to have value for both sides. And collaborations and partnerships, I mean, it's such a huge topic because we could talk about paid collaborations, partnerships. We could talk about unpaid. We could talk about email list swaps. We could talk about giveaway that you're going to do with another business. We could talk about podcasting. We could talk about hosting an event, whether that be virtual or in person. Like, there are endless ways that you probably already have partnered or collaborated with another business. Now, I think it'd be a valuable exercise for whoever's listening to this, like, take a minute and actually write down all of the collaborations or all of the partnerships that you have been a part of or that you have facilitated, maybe even yourself, and write down all of those things and then go back to them and think about, how did that collaboration play out? How did it go? Was it successful? Did it feel valuable on both sides? Were you able to continue the relationship with that business owner, with that business after that collaboration? Or was there a breakdown and now it's awkward, right? So asking yourself some of those questions will really give you a lot of clarity on what potentially went wrong. And I mean, there's so much we can go over, but what I'll say is, one is making sure that their brand, their business is in line with your own values. That's what we already talked about. Two, a big one is making sure that there is benefits on both sides. And that can look like a lot of different ways, whether that be promotional, whether that be financial. Then also communication. So communication, I think communication is one of the breakdowns that makes collaborations or partnerships go sideways. And you probably see this all the time with teams, right? So the communication has to be there and it has to be strong, and everyone needs to know what is going on, what's the process, what does this look like? And so there's so many different kind of levels of that. And so, yeah, I would encourage people, like, look at the collaborations, look at the partnerships that you've already done. And if you have a negative view of collaborations or of partnerships, and maybe you're scared to do it again, think about why you think that is. Did you feel like you were taking an advantage of? Did you feel like maybe you were taking advantage of the other business? Like, what did that look like? And how can we be honest and vulnerable about how did we contribute to this? Because we often just put it on the other person. We're like, well, they didn't communicate properly. They took advantage of me. All these things. It's like, well, did you share with them what your boundaries were? Did you tell them what you actually wanted out of the collaboration? Did you say, hey, I know you're pitching me this, but what if we did this? Did you actually voice your opinion? Because a lot of times we're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do that, or I guess I'll be a part of that. And then we end up feeling resentful of the partnership when really we could have just had that conversation up front and said, hey, listen, I don't know if this is going to work for me. However, what if we did this instead? And often people are really open to that. Often people are open to that shift in what that looks like. You just need to use your voice and ask for it. And so that's what I would say. I mean, there's so much more I could say on that, but feel free to ask more questions if you have them.
What's really powerful, what you just communicated, yes, communication is like the root of almost every relational issue that you can, family relationships, marital relationships, relationships with your children, partners, businesses. Yeah, it all comes down to communication. But I think what's interesting, and maybe what we could do a better job of, I'm just thinking, because I just think in execution all the time, it's like one of the things we do in the Rainmaker residency program is we try to fortify this relationship between CEO and marketing leader and giving them language to articulate if one is stressed or not stressed, because not having even language or symbols or tokens or things like that they can like be on the same page very quickly. Like we talk about this in one of my things in Fortune 1 about like red card, yellow card, green card. So like just having common language, because you don't want to offend and you don't know how to properly articulate your desires, your needs, without being fearful of offending or inconveniencing the other. But language in these collaborations, what I'm getting from what you just said is like almost to lead with curiosity, like more question format, like how would this serve your audience, or would you be open to, or what has worked for you really well in the past that I could help contribute to you? What is your goals for this quarter or this year that I could assist you with? Like, have you ever considered that? Like, just almost like an investigator in some way, in a compassionate curiosity way. Like your desire is to serve the other person first and foremost, and approaching it from a curiosity standpoint. Because sometimes what triggers me, or I shouldn't say word triggers, but like charges me, is when I'm like imposed upon, or when I feel like, in a class project in school where you're like, there's 5 of you, but you did all the work. Like that's what I don't ever want to have happen. And it certainly has happened. But back to your point, it's not because I did a great job at communicating or having language to feel empowered to communicate and advocate for my needs and desires. And what would I, get out of this as well? But back to what you were saying back before, it also starts with knowing what you want. Because I have found It's very difficult to deliver value to someone if they are on their own island, unsure of where they even find value in themselves, their business, and what they want for their future. So it's like, I can't really align myself with your destination if you don't even know where you're going. And that, I think, is even deeper rooted with our CEOs, because of all the responsibilities that our CEOs possess. First and foremost, the most important thing is to determine where this company is going and why. Right?
Yes. Oh, that's so good. And that will really help you, I think, gain clarity on what to say yes to and what to say no to, and then what to potentially pitch yourself. And I think that also having goals. So when you're putting together a collaboration, let's say, for example, you want to host an event, or maybe you want to do a giveaway, or whatever you want to do to like collaborate, whether it be with one other business or multiple businesses, you have to ask yourself, what are you looking for on the other side of that? Is the main purpose of this collaboration to build your audience, build community, like serve the people in your own audience, and then the monetization is potentially on the back end of that? Or is it like, this is actually a revenue driver and it's going to be for everyone? And it can be a mix of both as well. But you kind of need to know like what's the main goal here, because once you know the main goal, you can also communicate that vision and mission to the people that are going to be a part of it as well, so that they're not confused. I think some of the biggest like breakdowns that I've seen too with collaborations is, for example, like let's say you're hosting like an in-person workshop and there's two businesses that are going to collaborate on it. One business is like, yes, let's make this the most epic workshop you've ever seen. We're going to get a photographer, videographer, so that we're like having, content for our social media. It's going to be amazing. The other person's like, well, I just want to make money from this, But if you don't communicate that, right? Like if you're not actually communicating what the purpose is, and again, it could be a mixture of both, and that's fine. But if you're not communicating that, then there's tension there. One person's like, let's spend this amount of money on, catering for the event or this or that. And the other person's like, whoa, 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 like this is not what I envisioned. And so that's, I think, where it really has to come back to what's the purpose of it. And then having those uncomfortable conversations of, okay, like, yeah, what is our budget? Am I funding this idea because it was my idea and I'm bringing someone into it? Or are we splitting the costs and doing it as a full-on collaborative effort? What does that look like? So it is like you do have to have those uncomfortable conversations, but the sooner you have them, the less uncomfortable they are, because then it's just clear. And then it's like, okay, great. We're going into this knowing. And again, like Veronica, this is me speaking from a place of making so many mistakes in this area in the past, of not having those conversations soon enough. And then the conversation has to happen after, and it's way more awkward after.
Yeah, it's like, why, your fifth boyfriend is way better than your first boyfriend. No, it's true. It's true. Sometimes when I'm DMing people and I see a DM that I sent out 4 years ago, I like cringe. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I really say
Yes.
that? Like, oh, just when you're
Totally.
reminded of like your high school pictures, your middle school pictures or whatever. And then you also get reminded because, the internet never forgets some things. You're like, gosh, dang it. But I think also there's humility found in that reminder that you've come a long way, and you're not going to get better at something unless you put forth the effort to get better at something, which means getting vulnerable and putting yourself out there to be maybe C minus, then C plus, and then B minus, and then B plus. But this conversation has profoundly, as opposed to just tacticals or tactics and strategies and tools, it's actually kind of impacted me in a more profound way than I had anticipated, because it really does go back to knowing thyself, knowing what you want, knowing why you're doing what you're doing and where you'd like to take things, and yourself, your family, your business, your team. And when you have clarity around those things, you now have better language to communicate to even collaboration partners, right? Like it all, God, it's such a trickle effect, a domino effect of sorts, that if put in the wrong order, if you lead with a collaboration without understanding a purpose and why first, it really also doesn't go very far, which is probably why if I look back, if I quickly audited in my mind some of those collaborations that were cringy or didn't end well, it's probably because I was in a state of what the freak am I doing? That some of us go through, years ago. So this has just more profoundly impacted me than I would have thought. And so I want to thank you for teaching me something live on this podcast. And I hope it's to the betterment of everybody listening as well. So thank you. And I just want to know, because like I said, good people recommend good people. You were recommended to me from another phenomenal human being, and vice versa. And so how can other great people connect with you and learn from you? Because what you do is so necessary for many of us moving forward that want to go back to the roots of pure business relationships.
Oh, well, thank you. And yeah, I appreciate you so much. And you are such an intentional person. And I love that about you. So I'm grateful to be here. Yeah, you can connect with me on my website, which is businessbabescollective.com. I also have a podcast, Business Babes Collective. And you can also find me on Instagram. I'm at Danny Living Life, Danny with an I, Living Life. If you want to see a little behind the scenes of business life and mom life. We were just talking about this before, but I'm pregnant with my second, so that's super fun. I'm going to ask you all the questions
Mm-hmm.
of how you do it with two. No, it's exciting. Like, and you know, I love working with people on this because I think it's just like, it's so fun to think about like the possibilities
Mm-hmm.
of what can happen when you collaborate and
Mm-hmm.
work with other people. If you're just kind of like dipping your toes into it, or maybe you see other people do it and you're like, that's so cool, but how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just love strategizing.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when walls come down between people and we look at everything abundantly, including the relationships that are brought to us. So, my love language is relationships, no doubt about it. If anybody ever comes to me with any kind of collaboration, just I'm giving you my secret right here, right now. Put relationships at the top. That's my favorite. That's the season of life that I'm
Yes.
in. Proximity, intimacy, swimming with fewer in the deep end is my kind of my ethos right now. So, thank you, Danielle, for
Love
joining
that.
today's Rainmaker podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rainmaker podcast. We believe you can't get real results or have real relationships that last without being real first. If you resonated with today's episode, leave us a review so we can keep serving up the truth and tips that help you become the empowered leader that I know that you are. And always head over to veronicarami.com to check out all the free resources I have for you and the show notes from this episode. Until next time, my friends.